my job. I'm the one that tries to narrate what we're doing, what we're building. For the engineers, sometimes for my stakeholders, like I do exec meetings, all kind of people. So I see myself as like a narrator. I'm like a storyteller for work. That's really my job. So oftentimes this is like a meme I saw this morning that I thought was so relevant. So my screen is great. It's funny. So there, we thought we were going to have some kind of deliverable to show the team today as far as, oh, here's what the interface is going to look like. But after we spent some time, we realized like there's still so much to explore and understand. So we're still kind of in that brainstorming phase, and I think that's okay. I just want to make sure to kind of set that up as where we're at still. It's like when it comes to work, it takes weeks until I show stuff. So to do it in one day to where we're at, I'm actually really glad. So let's dive into the 4,000 lines below the surface that I'm talking about here. All right. So we basically just continue to brainstorm off of what all the great ideas that we were talking about on Friday. This is really just a poster that we came up with together. Erica has done wonderful note-taking. We had everyone come up with their idea of what it would look like, what it would feel like, what is important, what they want to see. And it was so impressive to see all the different ways. There are like land-based ways, there are map-based ways, there are like crazy node connection, network-based ways. And we just kind of tried to collect everyone's ideas and put it onto one poster board. You can imagine how crazy that was. That was like 15 sheets all into one piece of paper. So this kind of, I'm gonna just like walk top to bottom, bear with me. This is very informal. Some of the key things that we wanted to focus on, I just like highlighted with the yellow here. So there's the aspect of kind of like, so right now, data, right? That's just one of the things we've been talking about. There's data, right? And to just have this mess of, this collection of information that's organized can be very daunting and hard to make sense of. So one of the key things that we want to make sure is immediately possible is just ways to control it, I guess, right? Filtering, configuration, whether that's by, interesting queries like, all my female ancestors that have more than 3 kids. Like imagine that is a filter type, right? You can, and imagine that you are a female in your family with 3 kids. You can immediately connect with all your ancestors just like that. Like we're trying to think of all the ways that we think we want to be possible in this, I don't think of myself as a female ancestor with 3 kids, but I'm just saying as an example. So there's other things like, so we talked about core concept that we talk a lot about at work. So the UX designer, my job is to make things like understandable. Like when you look at an interface and they just go like, wow, here's everything. You're just like, what the heck is happening here? So the concept, and I like to share like jargon because words give you power. You have to Google later and you try to learn more about it. This concept is called progressive disclosure. It's really common in the UX space. Basically, it's just like starting with the base idea. Imagine it's like you squint your eye, you step back, 50 feet, and then you tap into it, and that's when more information expresses itself to you. So that's kind of the idea. We just wanted to make sure to highlight that that's kind of a key part of how this becomes usable. Is that we allow people to enter into the information, So obviously, I think Kanye talked about it, and I feel very, I'm super happy to hear the Land People's story as being a great base. And imagine that that's where we'll start. Imagine we can explore other content types as we continue to explore this. But yeah, what's great is to hear that kind of that rebounding of what we were saying. A really good idea that came out was different ways to visualize strengths of relationships. So you can just kind of see the thicker line, right, between 2 nodes could be an example way of visualizing a stronger relationship between 2 objects. I think of my family in Honolulu, where we have all these connections and stories. I went to school there. My mom used to, my mom's here. My parents here. I don't know that. My mom used to work in the front office. It's like my dad lived there. I was pretty much born, born there, lived there for a move. But anyway, so everyone lives there, right? There's so much connection to that house. That would be a very thick line between our family and that house, right? In that place. But visualizing that, making that partial, making that understandable. That's something that we want to make sure is like something possible with this thing. Come on, Kanye. This was like your brilliant, and I don't want to like give away your secrets, but it's from a video thing to deal with. I gotta think about it.
Oh, yeah, so basically, I was kind of just thinking about, there's so many different data types that we could show relationships with between Kanaka or family or places or documents. And my idea was that whatever type of item there is in the middle, we can select what kind of relationships we want to look at based on like a wheel, so that it kind of compartmentalizes what you want to select and filter by. It's more of like a method of filtering relationships, so you don't have to look at too much on the screen and be able to look at that. It's something that even Taylor had like said that wasn't what I was thinking, but like maybe even think more was maybe we can filter data as you're looking through maybe a Kanaka's like biography or like stories, and filter all of that information by what do you want to look at, like audio files that they have. That might, maybe that Kanaka has like stories that they told that we're able to capture on like a recording or something, to tell it to their like great grandkids. And I think that goes into the next part.
Yeah. I mean, and that's another thing. Like Web 1.0 is multimedia. Like obviously we gotta have all the different types of multimedia. You can even see like at the bottom, someone start going into like, let's do it AR. Like they're there with you. Oh, come on. I worked at Unity for a little bit, but I don't know any of that. So okay, moving on. So another thing is so there's no such thing as like, I mean, with this point of history, I think we were talking about it on Friday, right? It was like the concept of truth is really interesting, right? Like the way you can see the top right corner, it's a rainbow graphic. It's like even the person sitting 2 feet from you, you're looking at 2 different rainbows. Because the way the light hits it, backs to you, it's literally a different rainbow. Stories of the same ancestor could be conflicting. There could be like different perspectives of the same person, of the same situation, of the same event, right? So there's a certain aspect that we tried to like, as we were like trying to jam through this thing, like imagine that it's like a Venn diagram, so that's like the 2 documents there. There's the overlap that could be an important part of what you're trying to, this is a consistent part of the story. And there's also the differences of what those 2 stories actually miss on, I guess, or where they're different. Both aspects are really interesting to tell you something about that story, much more nuanced with it. So something to think about, basically Venn diagram, either the inside or the outside. Visual thinker, I don't know, I hope that lands with people. Other things, other ways to visualize, whether it's graphs, whether it's there's so many different ways that we could do it. Document, weight, footnotes, showing sources of origin. And of course, like, so one thing that I think has come up over and over again is this idea of how like place, like, okay, how is this different than ancestry.com? Our connection to place is like nowhere else. I mean, it's from my understanding of it, it's incredible. Yesterday was probably like the best place to do it, because you were in it, you sensed it, you felt it, you looked around, and it was like you felt like so small. The place was, you were within the place, and it's, I mean, like how we do this, whether it's maps, whether it's nodes, and you see expansions and clustering of data, and you expand it, you can dig in. It's like using place, location, really going to be a really interesting aspect of this that we want to continue to dig into. How we do it, maybe this is a brainstorm in itself, a whole arc of work in itself. But yeah, that gets into basically our thing. Let's see, five minutes will be 15 minutes. Does anyone have questions, ideas, thoughts?
We'll do 5 questions, 5 minutes for questions after.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Or after I'm Paul.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Paul now, and then questions now.
Anybody have questions from the visualization team? Also, anybody from the visualization team?
Yeah, that wants to also share.
It was like overwhelmed too yesterday, like I don't know, like I don't know, like it was like 30 of us in our visualization group, and everyone just throwing amazing ideas. And that's why I was like, oh my god, we have to capture this. And the fastest way was to like write it out and draw it out. And yeah, honestly I couldn't sleep last night because yeah, this is just the beginning. Like yeah, I was like naturally brainstorming in my head. And I was like eager to come up with, but we could do this, but we could do this. So, yeah, like, yeah, I'm just happy that we're able to like converge our minds and like, yeah, it's just very energizing just to, like, oh my God, there's so much more that we're taking.
You know, it's like it takes, we all have like different thinking styles, yeah. I'm like one of those like, boom, like I'm like, boom, here's everything we can do. Like someone like Erica's great, like, boom, like, let's focus on this. And it takes a village, right, to build some of these things. So it's like everyone's thoughts and approach and whatever is important. And I hope that came across this whole weekend. Like we're telling everybody, kanaka, technical, non-technical, please come. Go ahead.
I was about to just say what you're going to build on what you're saying. Like, I think it made us coming together, what made it stronger is because of our different backgrounds. And like, we're not all technical, we're not, we're all coming from different walks of life and different experiences, but that overlap of similarity, but also differences like, oh, I never thought of that. And as a soil PhD student or like, like a middle school teacher, like I thought that was really fascinating for, someone. I think it was as important to have non-technical people in the room.
Oh, you know what? The Wi-Fi wasn't working for me. Do you have another asset insider? I know you did you were working on this stuff too, yeah? Oh,
yeah,
look.
it was like, I added some.
Oh, shucks. You know what? Like we said, I mean, do you want to connect or we can?
Yeah, do it.
Yeah, yeah, because we're short on. I mean, we're ahead, so you can jump over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, please, yes.
I love seeing all the like, emotionality of the language that's present there, that like, not just data, but joy. I'm curious if you felt like in the discussion or in the drawings, there was like a rising visual language that felt like the visual piece or partner to Olelo and Moʻolelo, which is like a different visual language for communicating this kind of pilina across time.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that absolutely is something that's going to be important because the way you present information can tell a story. It's like when I say I'm a food guy at work, like my job is to be like, okay, here's like all the different ways that we can approach this. And then I take it to my product manager and they say, Taylor, you're crazy. Let's go with this one. Like that's my job. And it works as long as I have that partner in the space. So I mean, like all that to say, it's going to take exploration, I think, to land on that, what you're talking about, because it's very special and it's going to take work to find it. But absolutely, yes, very good question.
Do you want to explain this to just because we have it?
Oh yeah. So if you, I mean, it's really just to visualize kind of like how this sort of thing could work. It's like real basic, Figma prototype kind of active. Oh. Just kidding. Well, okay. Yeah. So what you can imagine is, so what all the prototype does is animates between these different yellow strings. So as you would, you can notice that there's the timeline at the bottom and also the map showing like clusters of nodes in a single, like based on space. So the idea here is that we could like, imagine if you could see your family's migratory patterns over time. Or even, like, this goes back to filtering. I can see all Hawaiians' migratory patterns over time. You can see wars happening. You can see Oahu getting wiped out at the battle with Kaipili, right? Like interesting moments in time. You could like story tell through location and maps and data. So just showing like what it could look like as things change. Anyway, that's the basic idea there. Thanks for calling that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's just I was able to like
sorry. Yeah, or sorry, I noticed Lars made progress. Sorry, I didn't want to make sure not skip over that. This one. Yeah. It's great. I mean, yeah, if you don't mind, just real quick. No pressure.
Really, even though we have all these figures, there has to be able to visualize it. It's kind of like pieces, so. We can see that as some numbers and then we have on the side you'll have like those places in your data and then the numbers that correlate with it. But if you tap into those little white dots, you'll be able to go deeper into those places, and eventually you might get to a person and you might have a snapshot of their life, which is something that we're talking about. How would we able to like put things to it and put people to it? That's what we're looking for.
That's way nicer than what I have. But this is kind of my idea as far as like the wheel. You know, there can be different types of data types, like Kanaka places, LA documents, families, so on and so forth. And maybe on the right, you can have that better visualization of a person. But I figured maybe you would pick one of these relationships or multiple ones or multiple relationships. You'd be able to like see on the left the visualization of like the relationships. And you know, potentially you could click on like Edwin, my father, and his entire information would pop up on the right. And one of the ideas that I was also thinking about was the sorting of data. Something I was talking about Friday was that we need to make sure that whatever information is up there, we should be able to look at where it came from and who's saying that, because there can be conflicting source or information from different types of sources. As long as we make that clear, you know, we can still show everyone's kind of like sources and data. And this is just like, since it would be a little bit too like visually noisy if we kind of like put different colors for different sources, maybe it would make more sense to interact with the data to see where it came from, such as if I had a birth certificate and it was like, oh, it's source health.hawaii.gov or something like that. Yeah. But that's it.
Wait, can you zoom in on that one?
Okay. This one?
Yeah.
And it's a documentation. It's I love to see it.
Okay, one more time, but you more for the. Okay. Thank you all. I think we're gonna now flip it over to somebody from the forms or the uploader, like the uploading documentation.
That's
Okay, cool. That's really okay.
Nice.
Yeah, I'll do it first. Okay, aloha. My name is Ainoa. We're from team Aloha Show You. And our goal was to build a request form so that people could add information to the database. So it's a request data intake. So that what that entails is if you want to add an individual to your family tree, you add the individual's information, you add the individual's parents, so the mother, the father. It could be an adopted mother, adopted father. And this is the website that we built. So it's fully functioning. You can go to it, you can add information. And I already logged in, but there is a login screen. It's going to be really fast. So if you could like take a snapshot. Right there, that's the login screen. It remembers my password information and it just jumps in.
Okay.
So also you can contact me at my username. And so the first thing you do is this is like a crude beginning, it's just a working prototype, but we can essentially add that person we're talking about, like, okay, I want to add I guess me, you start off, so my family name, then just letters and reasonable numbers. And these are also like data validation, making sure that they're entering in numbers and they're not trying to hack your website and you know, Hanako and stuff. So oh sure, I can zoom in on the browser like this.
Yeah.
Okay, there. Oh no, see, our code runs super fast. So if I'm just gonna fill in dummy information so that so I'll explain it and then fill in the dummy information as you can see. So is that clear? So one thing we wanna the visual team was focused on was the user interface and the user story, and to make sure there's a an understandable flow of information and what are the requirements, what we want the individual, what information we want from them to have a successful, I guess, addition to the database. So the first one is the basic information, that's the individual's information. And then when they finish that step, they can progress to the other relationships. And that's going to be used later in like to link that person to their parents. But one of the limitations of our database so far is you only can add an individual and their parents instead of the individual and their children. So if you wanted to add their children, you would have to add another individual and then talk about their parents who were the previous individual that you added. So that's one of the limitations. So we wanted to focus on the minimum amount of information that the user needed to input so that they don't have to deal with all this information. They can get a quick setup to adding the information. So father is not a number, these are unique languages that nobody speaks.
Support multiple languages.
So when we hit next, we can choose a file, and this was basically the reason why it was intended as a request form is to upload information, but also upload supporting documents to the individual. Because the idea of being, it would go through a validation process, and you would have to provide something like a birth certificate, or in the case of something that's maybe not a requirement, you can add stuff like the presenter before was talking about adding photos maybe from like their high school and they're like an athlete or something. So just something that links other records that they existed at this time and who they were. But the priority was a validation. So we just thought you could just upload any image. So I can just, this is the new 2023. Its birthday was this year. So when we add it, there's this validation. This is good for making sure that our database works, because we had a bunch of ideas, but getting to this point where it's a live website and it's functional, it's a huge deal to see that it's, hey, you did a good job, you know what you're doing. And you can view right now, Raul, he created a view into the database to see all the records that we've been just jamming in there to make it easy for the presentation. So I'll just click on the view submitted records, and then you'll see just all the records. So it starts off with a 101 ID, and that's just a unique identifier to the person you added. So then when every new person you add, it just iterates one more from that. So 102 is the next one. These are all siblings. And what you notice, it's live. So I handed the code off. I uploaded it to GitHub, and that means other people can work on it. So Andrew, our teammate, who was supposed to do the backend work, but somehow we swapped places, and he did front end, I did the back end. He started working on the code that I pushed out. I said, okay, I'm done with, we finished the back end. Could you help polish up the front end and make it nice, like how you see today? He uploaded his information on his side. So it's live in the sense that he can access it from his computer, upload it, and I can access it. So it's a proof that now anybody who has access to this and who has an account, they can add their information. And it's a single database of all of things so far. So it's just proof of concept, everything's working correctly. And then just I guess working backwards of, this is what we ended up with, where you can see like what our goal is. So here's the login screen paused, and so you do your login, and this is part of the user story. So this is thanks to the design team. We got all of you, these Wahinas in front. Well, so I'm gonna finish the presentation, and because what happened was in the span of time that we had to focus on one feature, and that was the request form. And then we did a quick visualization, and we got the code up and running. And then after, Carlos is gonna show if we had more time and a bigger budget, what we could provide. So this is the user flow. It's similar, and hopefully you can kind of see that the site that we created is pretty similar to what we had in mind. So it didn't just come from nothing. It was built every step of the way. The team broke up into the front end, back end developers and the visualization team. They handed us the visualization, and then we programmed that up. Before that this is what it looked like, just more crude. And this is what I handed off to Andrew. So thanks to Andrew for making this look more like what we intended. And then this is the database. This is actually the interface, the service that's interfacing with the database, because you can't just code all day. Like here's an example of, you don't want to just look at this all day. This is a little bit more easier to interact with, but we can make sure that the database is running correctly. And you can kind of see this is where all the information is laid. And then this is all the files on the software. So the site we made, this is like the whole collection. This is how we're sharing it. He's making updates. Raul over there, he's making updates. Andrew's making updates, and then I just learned how to use this tool. So I'm updating my knowledge, I guess. And then here's the hosting platform that is where the website is stored. The database is stored. And that's important because we're not just making something that's local on the machine. It's alive and living, and it's just working. And I guess the theme I'm going backwards in time is we're using a lot of tools because we had a simple idea, but in order to complete that idea, we're using a bunch of the infrastructure needed had to be built beforehand. So we're using stuff like to make the buttons all pretty and stuff. We're using all these types of libraries that are pre-built because we weren't able to finish this in the span of time that we had. And then this is the hosting site that we built up, and more information. And then it all started with that brainstorming. So going from those post-its on Figma to the final project, that's kind of this is probably the most exciting part. Like 8 o'clock at night, finding the things running from post-its the previous day. It's kind of a dream come true. So I'm gonna pass it down to Carlos. Do you need just HTML?
Yeah, I'll try to make it.
So
Go for it. Try to make it quick.
So again, he worked on, now that we have the proof of technology and the database going correctly, he's going to show us, blow our minds of what it could look like, what this one feature could look like in a fully functional website.
So yeah, we designed this out. This is the landing page right here, and I showed it to I was all stoked. I showed it to my wife this morning. She goes, "Oh, it looks like Google Drive." And I said, "Oh, that's because I use Google Material Design." But it comes back to what you were saying. It's been something that's been in my mind, which is like the visual language, the emotion, and people come to these sites, especially like the visualization, like they want to come and see like, oh, like this reflects Hawaii. Google Material Design does not. You know, and so like my first stab, last night, because I was in sleep, so I was just getting super into it. I was like, hey, what if we could do a color palette off of like where we were in the Maiʻa? So like but a plugin by Google, so. But still, like, what are the ways that we can use color typography space to reflect, to reflect that, yeah. And so this is just a reflection of, what you just showed right now. But, I was speaking through what the permission team was doing. I was like, oh, this is super interesting. Like, how could we figure out a way, like, we're building up this tree, like, how can we start to, like, share this tree with other people, which you'll see. And so you'll see here through the status of like review in progress versus verified. And so when you'll see all the different people that this person has typed up, has added. So when you add a new person, you have your 3 steps of basic information, the relationships of your biological mother, father, adopted mother, father, and so forth. And then the last step, you know, for us it was important, like, hey, what's the minimum amount of information you need to prove this? And it's this idea of a birth certificate or some sort of form that represents this, and with additional documents as well. Another use case actually that I thought about would be cool is like, you know, like what if we could have like specific flows for like how do you prove, you know, how to get into community health school? If you have a flow of like all the documents you need for that, so there could be specific flows for each of those. So this idea of, you know, adding your birth certificate, yada yada yada, you finish and you see that, you know, it's been added here. And then you can see everything about Israel, Moʻokūʻauhau, the late last night I was thinking about like this idea of like permissions and genealogy, and I was listening to like Taylor story about like he didn't know that his best friend was actually his cousin, and I was like, okay, when you're actually creating these trees, it's a network effect. Like I'm creating a tree, someone else is creating trees, so on and so forth. And so there's this idea of like, hey, here's Taylor, and he's built up this tree. There's this other person who's also been developing their tree, and you can see this like anonymized relationship between Taylor and this ghost person. And what you'll see is that, hey, like this person has added someone that seems like it's someone that Taylor has added to. And so you can have this idea of like, hey, it looks like your father's a common data point. Like, can we build a bridge between your tree, you know? So you can request to share that still has permission you guys involved in it. And then you can see like, you know, your tree through permission is created. And like maybe John, that's probably not your cousin, but let's say John's your cousin, you know? He's like, hey, he's added someone to the tree that you never knew, like you didn't know your dad's dad or something. And so they're just like, this is a concept, but like this idea that you can help build each other's trees. That's it. But the amplifying, yeah.
That's awesome. So,
And, yeah.
so I just wanted to add that we were focusing on one feature of a request form, and what he showed, I was just reminded that even though we were just adding one piece, this is what it looks like when it fits into the whole. This is what the whole picture would look like, and what all the other what the simple information of adding to the database, what it could be used for, beyond just adding information for one tree. It could be for even one.
So much. This is so interesting. Got a couple minutes. Any questions for this team? Okay. Okay. I also wanted to pause to like, I know Alex and the Ohana table. Do you guys have anything you want to talk about today?
Yeah, I've actually been working on a little slideshow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Well, how do you hop in and then we'll do permission to Slack. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Hand it over to Sorry. Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Petrescu. So the idea behind this hackathon project, it's kind of started probably a few months before when I was helping my daughter with her Hawaiian class, and I was trying to kind of like learn some Moʻōlelo Hawaii. So I was trying to kind of like look up, like, I'm a technologist. So I was like, okay, I need an app. I need something to start, like, to, you know, show me something. And I couldn't find anything. And it was very like frustrating from what I could find. And then my wife works for an organization that the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation, and they do a lot with like reading by like materials and trying to research and also write in it. And I saw that they also struggle with writing it because there's not really like tooling or things to do. So as someone who's builds software, I was like, what can we do to basically allow other people to start building tools and things for modern readers and writers. So these are a little hackathon team. It's like me, my brother-in-law Andrew, my daughter, and my nephew Makakoa, and we picked up a straggler Joe. But it was fun because I really wanted to. This is a wonderful space. I'm talking to Kim yesterday because it allowed me to bring my family in to have them be part of this, which was really important because they're both thinking of technology careers and things like that. And so being part of this room of all these wonderful, smart people of designers and thinkers and technologists and everyone, and then being part of it was really amazing. So thank you everyone for creating the space that allowed this to happen. So like I said, like a dictionary exists, right? Everyone uses the website and they go to it and they search it, but it's only in website form. You only have, and it only has like some very basic features that are very like dictionary-like. Some apps do exist, but it's like basically like a random company generates a whole bunch of word lists and then generates an app. Basically, it's not an actual dictionary or anything for anyone that would want to learn Hawaiian. They're very like basic things. And then modern Moʻōlelo learners, like and writers, need better tools. They need apps, keyboards, learning apps, all sorts of things like that. And the part that was kind of that I think is important is that just like we showed, like in this, like people have lots of great ideas and lots of stuff, but they need access to data, right? You can build all sorts of really interesting things, all sorts of interesting apps, visualizations, all sorts of that framework, that data needs to be there and accessible so you can build on top of. So I thought that's something we could help with. So we actually worked with the folks that run the website and Moʻokūʻauhau to actually get access to this information. So this is all with them and with their permission. Nothing is kind of there. That's why it's actually many months in the making because it took a long time to converse with them to get permission to work with this and to build this. So this is what the API looks like. I mean, the website looks like right now, right? Like if you type in POW or something, that's kind of what you get. And then if you click on one of them, this is like this mountain of text. And so if you're like a researcher or stuff like that, like maybe you can parse this, but if you're like a 10-year-old kid or like me, like trying to just learn, I'm like, what exactly do I take from this? There's so much here. So anyway, these are some of the issues and why, like, even though something exists, we can do better if we had access to the data in a different format. So the solution that we built is an API on top of the library data, allows you to search for words, get definitions, and something that didn't see, like the ability to kind of submit and get synonyms and antonyms, like a thesaurus, which right now, like that's like a modern writer would like want to kind of like, you can't just use the same word like over and over again. And then get sample sentences, not only from like one or two, but from existing text. So throughout, and just keep getting just mine data to see how are these words used? How is this word used in different contexts, maybe throughout time, right? Like now, like how was it used 150 years ago? There's based on all the work of digitizing all of this, like old writing, it's like we now have access to them and we can start to mine it. But thinking about how this is misused in the past, like data and access to indigenous language data, we built something that was like owned and operated by the UH College of Language. So if they have access to the API, the data is there, like they're hosting it. They provide access to the API to people, to developers that want it. So this allows to not have situations like people building something and then selling the language back to you, right? Mm-hmm. That's something we want to avoid. So it's we try to alleviate this for that. And then it's a building block for the community, right? Like the thing we're talking about, the dictionary app is just one idea. The community, all these technologists and designers to build on top of it, to build. And then on the other things, like what would a modern Moʻolelo dictionary kind of look like? What kind of features would it have? So that's the idea of a dictionary where I brought like the kids in, it's like they're the ones learning. So I had them design the app, design the features for them, and then brought my wife. And then she's like, okay, here's the features that I would want. And then had heard like the design things. So it was really kind of like, again, like I mentioned, the ability to search, like word details, pronunciation guide, word of the day, sample sentences. It's built on like a React Native architecture, so we can provide iOS and Android apps pretty easily, so it's easy to kind of build. And the app would be open source. So while the data and everything is say like owned and maintained, the app itself doesn't need to be. So it can be like a grounding, like a platform for other people to build apps on top of, or it's for the community to contribute to the dictionary, new features and new ideas in the future without, having to build everything from scratch. And then for more advanced, like I mentioned, pull sample sentences from existing text. We can do that. The ability to do like type ahead prediction, right? Like we are normally used to when we type, we're not normally like writing out every single word. Like we have keyboard like helpers and things to do that. So we can start to build that. We can build like custom little keyboards we wanted. And then something that I've been working on kind of on the side along with them, the ability to take old Moʻolelo writings and turn them into modern day. So add the hakos and opinas to old text, which requires machine learning because it's like there's no like a one-to-one representation of each one. It's all based on context. But that's something that we can do once we have this platform that we can build on top of. And then something my wife was mentioning and that we're wanting to build in, the ability for the community to contribute to it. So you have this app, you have to say, oh, here's a definition, I think, or here's a pronunciation, how I would pronounce this word. So the ability for the community to submit information, and then for the Moʻokūʻauhau, like administrators and stuff to verify and say like, yeah, okay, cool, and then add it to the dictionary. So it's not just a book that exists one, it becomes a living document, a living database. So these are designs and user experience that my daughter and nephew, Makalika and Makokoa built with like, word of the day and things like that. All sorts of things that, I didn't necessarily think of, like pronunciation guide, sorry, there might be stuff in there. They were competing of who was actually doing the more work. But I thought it was really cool to be part of it. Here's our API documentation. So this is built and working right now. I ingested 45,000 words and definitions into it. We have an API that's built on top of it, so you can query it now and search for words and get definitions of words and all of that. So these are just a screenshot of the documentation page. You see it's working. So like a normal request, like for searching for how or something, would return a whole list of words right now, like with various definitions. And then we can build different UIs, right? It doesn't have to be the things. And then an admin for the team to actually edit content to verify if they like, if the dictionary said this, but they're like, I just want to clean it up. That's like too complicated. It allows them to kind of like edit, again, this information and kind of, this is kind of like the very beginning. We just got this kind of working and running and everything. Joe and Andrew just got the skeleton of the React Native app, querying data and starting doing it. So hopefully I can hand this over to the Moʻokūʻauhau team and they can start giving access and access tokens and stuff to be able to access the APIs, and then we'll continue to work on the dictionary and then open source GitHub repo so everyone can contribute. So that was our project.